In recent times, the United States has experienced a seismic shift in its economic landscape that has left investors, policymakers, and the general public both bewildered and anxious. At the heart of this upheaval lies President Donald Trump's bold decision to impose what has been described as the steepest set of U.S. import levies in a century. In just 48 hours, these sweeping tariffs have been linked to an astonishing disappearance of nearly $6.4 trillion in market value, a figure that has sent shockwaves through financial markets across the globe. The unprecedented move, aimed at forcing trading partners such as Japan, Canada, and other nations to pay their fair share, has elicited strong reactions from economists and diplomats alike, raising profound questions about the future of international trade and the very notion of free trade itself. Trump's policy, which includes tariffs ranging from 15 to 20% on steel and aluminum, has had immediate and far-reaching consequences. One prominent sector feeling the pressure is the U.S. auto industry. With production costs skyrocketing due to these tariffs, companies like General Motors have been forced to cut back production, leaving thousands of workers idle, while Ford has taken the unusual step of closing several production lines altogether, seemingly opting for a period of forced reflection, perhaps even a meditative pause, waiting in vain for a price correction that never seems to come. For everyday Americans considering a new car purchase, the prospect now includes an additional cost increase of at least 5 to 10%. One might say that if you were planning on buying a vehicle, you'd better pack a wallet that doubles as a flotation device in economic turbulence. Beyond the auto industry, the tariffs have rippled across agriculture, with American farmers facing a double-edged sword. Trump's tariff strategy, intended to protect domestic industries, has ironically diminished the appeal of American agricultural exports on the global stage. Soybeans, cotton, and wheat, once symbols of American agrarian might, have seen exports plummet, with soybean exports dropping by 15%, cotton by 10%, and wheat by 8% in the first year of these aggressive trade maneuvers, with the intended consequence being to boost domestic prices and create a liberated economic environment. The reality for American farmers has become a grim tale of lost markets and escalating costs. It is a scenario in which the promised free market advantages have been traded for higher prices at home, leaving consumers to wonder if they are inadvertently signing up for a nationwide diet funded by their own empty wallets. Perhaps the most dramatic illustration of these policies' reach came on April 2nd, a day Trump dubbed Liberation Day. On this day, the U.S. government imposed additional tariffs that were designed to free the national economy from what the administration described as an overdependence on imported goods. But rather than a day of national redemption, the policy announcement has been met with widespread skepticism and outrage. The irony of a leader proclaiming the liberation of the economy through measures that ultimately choke the domestic market was not lost on observers. Canadian leaders, among others, have rebuked the move. Ontario Premier Doug Ford, with a mix of sarcasm and candor, declared that while Trump calls it liberation, it might as well be termed Termination Day for the U.S. economy, a day that could inflict severe consequences on industries, consumer prices, and jobs alike. The ripple effects of these tariffs have not been contained solely within U.S. borders. In Canada, where trade is a cornerstone of the economic relationship with the United States, the new tariffs have provoked a robust and immediate response. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, a former governor of the Bank of England and a leading political figure now championing domestic worker protections, stated unequivocally that any attempt to weaken Canada would be met with firm resistance. Carney recounted that he had spoken directly with President Trump, making it clear that any move perceived as an economic attack would be countered decisively. In fact, Canada has already set its sights on retaliation, proposing a 25% tariff on U.S. goods valued at approximately $155 billion Canadian, reflecting a determination to protect its domestic economy and sovereign interests. This tit-for-tat escalation threatens to further erode the long-standing economic partnership between the two nations, a relationship once predicated on deep integration and mutual cooperation in trade, security, and defense. The global financial markets have not been spared the turbulence unleashed by these trade measures. Major stock indices, including the NASDAQ, Dow Jones, and S&P 500, have all been painted red as investor confidence has plummeted. The S&P 500, for instance, just experienced its worst quarter since 2022, while reported losses in the Dow Jones have reached staggering levels. More than 700 points vanished in a matter of hours. Analysts at institutions like Moody's and Goldman Sachs have warned of dire consequences: the potential loss of 5.5 million jobs, unemployment rates climbing to 7%, and a significant decline in GDP that could edge the economy toward recession. In a stark warning, Goldman Sachs has raised the probability of a recession to 35% from 20%, as the undermining of confidence from these tariff policies continues to loom large over both domestic and global economies. What makes the situation even more concerning is that these measures have been implemented not as a response to an external crisis, but rather as a product of domestic policy decisions emanating from the heart of Washington. The voices of dissent are growing louder, with major cities such as New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles witnessing protests by a coalition of workers, small business owners, and consumers who find themselves squeezed by a system that seems determined to keep burdening those least able to bear the cost. The chaos in the financial markets is paralleled by uncertainty in the corridors of power, where even the president's own economic advisors appear visibly divided over the best course of action. With options ranging from imposing universal tariffs and reciprocal tax models to negotiating tariffs by economic bloc with entities like the European Union, the administration is faced with the daunting challenge of attempting to control a situation that seems to be unfolding far beyond the intended scope of any single policy maneuver. Interestingly, while the tariffs have ushered in a period of significant economic turbulence and diplomatic friction, they have also provided an inadvertent platform for political and social commentary. Numerous media outlets, including those that have long supported Trump's agenda, have found themselves grappling with the unintended consequences of what many now view as an economic masterclass in miscalculation. Fox News, for instance, has been embroiled in debate over whether Trump's economic policies, which have been characterized by some as liberation and by others as a recipe for disaster, should be commemorated on Mount Rushmore. In contrast, other commentators have drawn attention to the stark reality that these policies are not incremental reforms, but rather a radical reordering of the nation's domestic and international economic priorities. Within the midst of this economic maelstrom, President Trump himself has not been silent. In a series of televised addresses and press conferences, Trump has attempted to reframe the narrative in his favor, insisting that the tariffs represent a bold reclamation of American economic sovereignty and a necessary blow against long-standing trade imbalances. However, his statements have often been met with incredulity, as observers point to the mounting evidence that the policies not only fail to revitalize American industry, but also risk igniting a broader trade war. During one particularly disconcerting press conference, a session that many analysts have described as emblematic of an administration spiraling out of control, questions about the president's hints at a potential third and even fourth term were met with a level of candor that appeared to disregard the constitutional constraints that underpin American democracy. His comments, delivered with a mix of bravado and nonchalance, forced the press into a state of frenzied speculation and underscored the growing disconnect between the rhetoric of invincibility and the tangible economic realities facing the nation. Much of the public discourse has turned to the potential long-term implications of these policies. Critics argue that the tariffs, by destabilizing domestic industries and souring international relationships, are merely a prelude to a more serious economic crisis, one in which the U.S. finds itself isolated on the world stage, caught in a cycle of retaliatory measures that could ultimately lead to a global recession. The symbolism of Trump's so-called Liberation Day has been particularly potent in this regard. While the president heralded the day as a moment of national rebirth, instances of social unrest and widespread job losses have prompted many to view it as emblematic of misdirected priorities. In one striking exchange, a representative from a major U.S. automaker was heard sarcastically remarking, "Who needs a car when you can have a panoramic tour of the unemployment line?" A bitterly ironic comment that encapsulated the growing discontent among workers, consumers, and investors alike. At the same time that global markets reel and domestic dissent mounts, Political analysts are increasingly concerned about the broader implications of a leadership style that appears to eschew the traditional checks and balances of American governance. The president's unabashed discussions of extending his time in power, notwithstanding constitutional constraints, have sparked a fierce debate about the very nature of democratic leadership. With some arguing that Trump's willingness to flout long-established norms indicates a shift toward an autocratic style of governance, others maintain that these are merely rhetorical flourishes designed to rally his base. Regardless of one's perspective, the fact remains that the policies introduced over the past several weeks have fundamentally altered the economic landscape, leaving many to wonder not only about the immediate fallout, but also about the lasting impact on the nation's democratic institutions. It is in this context of uncertainty and dramatic economic shifts that we, as observers of these unfolding events, are left to ponder the true cost of such radical policy decisions. The American economy, once a bulwark of free trade and open markets, now finds itself caught in a tug-of-war between protectionist impulses and the imperatives of globalization. As U.S. stocks continue to flounder and indicators such as consumer confidence and industrial output fall into freefall, one cannot help but marvel at the paradox inherent in policies that purport to liberate the nation's economy while simultaneously constraining its potential for growth. As ironic as it may seem, for some the new tariffs have become a kind of economic magic trick, a dazzling display in which trillions vanish from the market in what can only be described as a self-inflicted disappearing act. In moments like these, it is essential for us to step back and ask not only what these policies mean for trade and industry, but also what they reveal about the evolving landscape of political leadership in the United States. The specter of a third term, hinted at through seemingly offhand comments, continues to loom large, a prospect that many view as symptomatic of a broader departure from democratic norms. With the media, political allies, and international partners all watching closely, the president's actions in the coming months will likely determine whether the U.S. can recover from this period of instability or whether it is destined to endure a prolonged cycle of economic and diplomatic discord. As we continue to analyze these events, it is worth noting that amidst the turmoil, there remains a vibrant community of voices, ranging from seasoned industry experts to ordinary citizens, engaged in a passionate debate about the merits and pitfalls of these new policies. Many in this diverse audience are taking to social media and public forums to voice their opinions, and it is a conversation that shows no signs of abating. In fact, one might even say that if this were a scripted performance, the drama unfolding on the global stage would rival the twists of a primetime television series, except that in this case, the stakes are measured in trillions of dollars and the livelihoods of millions. For those of you watching this analysis, if you find yourself intrigued by these unfolding developments and the multifaceted implications of these tariffs, please consider subscribing to our channel and sharing your thoughts in the comments below. Your engagement helps us bring even more detailed analysis and up-to-the-minute updates on stories that affect not just our economy, but the world at large. Amid all the chaos, a question remains. What do you believe is the true cost of these tariff policies? And how should America recalibrate its approach to global trade? We invite you to share your perspective as we collectively navigate these uncertain times. The saga does not end with economic figures and policy debates. It also extends into the realm of public discourse, where humor and satire have taken on new meaning. Comedians like Chris Rock, Jim Carrey, and Jimmy Kimmel have seized upon the absurdities of Trump's rhetoric, particularly his claims of a destined golden age under his continued leadership, and transform them into biting commentary that resonates with a broad audience. In one memorable moment, Chris Rock's jabs at Trump's repeated promises and bizarre proposals, for instance, suggesting that injecting disinfectant might serve as a cure, demonstrated not only the inherent contradictions of the administration's messaging, but also the power of humor to illuminate troubling realities. One might quip that if economic policy were judged solely on its entertainment value, Trump's plan would easily win an Oscar for Best Economic Tragicomedy, even as producers scramble to figure out whether to roll out popcorn at the next press conference. Yet behind the ironic jabs and the laughable puns lies an undeniable truth. The policies currently shaping America's economic future have real-world consequences that extend far beyond mockery and media soundbites. With the U.S. stock market facing its steepest declines in recent memory and unemployment projections warning of millions more job losses alongside rising inflation, the repercussions of these decisions are felt by individuals, families, and communities throughout the nation and around the world. The fallout is not merely a matter of abstract percentages or fleeting headlines, but a complex tapestry of interwoven challenges that include consumer hardship, industrial stagnation, and a growing sense of isolation on the global stage. Across the political spectrum, experts have cautioned that the tariff approach, while ostensibly directed at rectifying trade imbalances and boosting domestic production, may inadvertently be sowing the seeds for long-term economic decline. This is not solely a debate about numbers or fiscal policy. This is a question of national identity and the fundamental values that underlie the U.S. commitment to free trade and open markets. As policymakers scramble to recalibrate their strategies in the face of mounting backlash, a poignant reminder persists. The economic decisions made today will shape the trajectory of future generations. In this light, debates over the merits and drawbacks of protectionist policies resonate far beyond the immediate headlines, touching on the very core of how America envisions its role in a rapidly changing world. Meanwhile, the diplomatic fallout has redefined long-standing alliances. Once considered inseparable, the bonds between the United States and its close allies have been tested by a series of unilateral decisions that have increasingly prioritized short-term political gains over enduring international partnerships. Canada, in particular, has emerged as a vocal critic of Trump's tariff policies. The Canadian government's measured yet resolute response highlights a broader sentiment among many nations that economic coercion, especially when masked as a bid for liberation, does little more than undermine the foundations of mutual trust and cooperation. As the international community grapples with the potential implications of a U.S. policy that could extend to a universal 20% tariff on all exporting countries, the specter of a retaliatory spiral looms ominously, a scenario in which the cost of isolationism could be measured not in the billions, but in the very livelihoods that sustain nations. Yet amidst all this uncertainty, and even as global markets appear to teeter on the brink, there remains a passionate debate about the nature of leadership and accountability in the modern era. The administration's reluctance, or perhaps its inability, to provide clear, actionable solutions in the wake of these economic shocks has further eroded public confidence. With elusive promises of a boomtown USA and grandiose visions of a revitalized economy, critics have accused the administration of offering little more than symbolic gestures and empty rhetoric. The lack of concrete measures to offset the plummeting stock market, rising inflation, and the cascading effects of global tariffs speaks volumes about the challenges inherent in trying to manage an economy amid unpredictable external pressures and internal discord. Even as the international community braces for what many see as an inevitable confrontation, the domestic political arena has become a stage for debates that are as much about identity as they are about economic principles. The repeated references by Trump to extending his time in office, a claim made even as the U.S. Constitution firmly restricts any such possibility, have only intensified concerns that the nation might be on the precipice of a dangerous departure from democratic norms. With each seemingly offhand remark about a potential third or even fourth term, the administration risks alienating not only its international allies, but also a significant portion of the American electorate. And while these remarks have sparked derisive laughter from comedians and pundits alike, they simultaneously serve as a stark reminder of the fragile balance between power and accountability in a democratic society. In weighing all these factors, one cannot help but notice a certain tragicomedy at work. Economic analysts, policymakers, and everyday citizens are now forced to navigate a landscape where promises of liberation are intricately intertwined with escalating costs, domestic job losses, and a mounting international backlash. The irony is palpable. In a bid to free the nation from the perceived shackles of imported goods, the very measures designed to safeguard American prosperity have, in fact, precipitated a crisis of confidence, both at home and abroad. While some might laugh at the absurdity of the situation, the harsh reality remains that the cost of these policies is being borne by ordinary people everywhere, leaving behind a trail of uncertainty that may define this era for years to come. As this unprecedented economic drama unfolds, it serves as a crucial reminder of the delicate interplay between domestic policy and international relations. The decisions made on Capitol Hill reverberate far beyond its halls, impacting every facet of daily life, from the price paid at the grocery store to the stability of multinational markets. It is now more important than ever for citizens and policymakers alike to engage in an open, balanced dialogue about the true implications of these measures. In order to forge a path forward that safeguards both economic stability and democratic integrity, robust debate and a willingness to challenge conventional wisdom will be essential. Before we sign off on today's in-depth analysis, we want to remind you to hit that subscribe button and share your thoughts with us in the comments below. How do you see these unprecedented tariff policies reshaping the future of trade and American politics? Your insights and opinions are vital as we strive to bring clarity to these complex issues and ensure that every voice is heard in the national conversation. In summary, the era marked by President Trump's aggressive and, at times, provocative tariff policies is not merely an episode in economic history. It is a turning point that challenges the foundational tenets of free trade and international cooperation. The dramatic fall in market values, soaring production costs, and the palpable discord between longtime allies like Canada and the United States are all symptomatic of deeper systemic issues. Critics argue that while the rhetoric of liberation promises a resurgence of American industry and national pride, the reality is a precarious cocktail of job losses, rising inflation, and an increasingly isolationist stance that may well leave the nation vulnerable to long-term economic decline. As policymakers deliberate over the next steps, and as the world watches with bated breath, the question remains, has the promise of liberation become a veneer for policies that undermine the very fabric of the global economic system? The unfolding narrative is one of both caution and opportunity, a scenario where decisions made in the short term have the potential to shape the international order for decades to come. Whether viewed as a masterstroke of economic defense or a reckless gamble that could plunge the nation into a prolonged period of instability, Trump's tariff policies have irrevocably altered the discourse on trade and governance in the United States. As the drama continues to unfold on the global stage, one wonders if the spectacle itself might one day be remembered as a turning point. The moment when economic reality outpaced political bravado, forcing a reckoning with the values that have long underpinned American prosperity. In these turbulent times, as both domestic and global arenas teeter on a knife's edge, it remains incumbent upon us to question whether the path chosen is one that will ultimately lead to a more stable and inclusive economic future, or if it is merely a prelude to deeper divisions and enduring challenges. The debate is far from over, and while satire and irony may provide fleeting moments of comic relief, the substantive issues at stake demand our full and undivided attention. What do you think are the long-term implications of these tariff policies on the global economy and the U.S. political landscape? Your opinions matter, so let us know in the comments below as we collectively chart our course through these uncharted waters. Ultimately, this unfolding saga compels us to confront the inherent tensions between nationalism and globalization, a tension that lies at the very heart of modern economic policy. As policies intended to liberate the economy continue to provoke severe backlash, one is reminded that the true measure of success is not in transient market rallies or poetic declarations of national pride, but in the tangible well-being of the citizens who, day in and day out, bear the consequences of these far-reaching decisions. While history will someday judge these tumultuous times, the challenge for today's leaders is to balance ambition with prudence, ideology with pragmatism, and in doing so, steer a course that preserves both economic resilience and the democratic spirit of a nation committed to fairness, innovation, and progress.